Thank you, everyone, for attending. This is the last session of the day, but we have a very interesting discussion now ahead. I think we discussed so many different aspects of SDV during the whole day, and now we're going to focus on value, isn't it? How is the value that OEMs deliver to their final customers changing in this SDV process, and how you help OEMs designing to deliver this value to the customers? So before we diving into the theme, I would like to invite the panel to introduce themselves.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so my name's David Wilson. I'm the Director for Virtual Engineering, based in the Detroit region. I've been in ZF now for nearly 5 years, and previous to that, I was at Ford Motor Company here in Detroit for about 18 years.
Hi, I'm John Heinlein. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with Sonatus. Sonatus is a vehicle software company from Silicon Valley. We're in production today with Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis vehicles. I've been with Sonatus for about 9 months now, and before that I was a very long time with ARM, also in the automotive sector and other places before that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Aditya, Pathak. I lead the automotive and the transportation logistics industry segments for Cognizant, based out of Princeton, New Jersey. Been with the automotive industry for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, predominantly focused on manufacturing and some of the other industry segments, building and bringing software, high-performance software teams for business transformation for those industries. So being an electronics and telecom engineer by education, this is the perfect intersection for me to bring mobility plus technology plus connectivity to the automotive industry.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Nitin Pai. I had strategy for a company called Tata Elxsi. Quite a mouthful, that second word. The Tata is easy enough. So the easiest way to remember that is electronics times software integration. And that's exactly what we do. We are a product engineering specialist. We are about 7,000 engineers working for about 60 customers, combination of OEMs and suppliers, and some silicon companies and so on, essentially building the entire ecosystem and helping them engineer products. I have been with Tata Elxsi for the longest time, but I can only tell you that I was a motorcycle designer before I moved to Tata Elxsi. So truly Zen.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think a good point to start this conversation is really to get your thoughts on how this digital transformation and this journey towards software-defined vehicles is affecting the role of software and hardware in the vehicle and how it's affecting differentiation.
Thank you. I think we have to realize that the software-defined vehicle is really a paradigm shift in our industry, okay, in the mobility industry. How the vehicle, not only how we as drivers and operators interact with the vehicle, but also how the vehicle interacts with the environment around it, okay? And there's so much more opportunity that's possible. As we see, as a tier one supplier, we see the number of ECUs that proliferate inside a vehicle and the migration towards a domain-centric architecture coming to reality. It looks like the industry might be supporting 30% of domain-centric architecture by platform through beginning 2025. So there's a large number of organizations that are looking for or making software-defined vehicles a reality, I think, and the real opportunity, is starting to sort of come to the fore. The question is, how will the OEMs, necessarily sort of deal with changing that mindset from local-based solutions, in that ECU, to something that's working all together in that sort of domain-central architecture?
Well, maybe I'll build right on top of that to say, and I agree with all that, as that's happening, and as you're moving away from this ECU's in this black box over here and it does one job for its whole time, you're getting several things that happen. One is that this consolidation of ECUs, there's domain, but then there's also, domain is like one of the end goals, but just general consolidation means that the hardware that did one job now has to do multiple jobs. And so now you need modern software development practices, virtualization, hypervisors, various technologies you can use to do that. But it unlocks this ability to have hardware sharing, which is cost savings. The second thing is there's a consumer expectation with their smartphones of the device being upgradable. I mean, the car being upgradable, the phone being upgradable. So look, phones are amazing, technically amazing, unbelievable stuff, black magic. But the reason the phones are really great is because of the upgradability, the app ecosystem, and so on. So having a car that once you buy it gets better continuously, because you see OEMs really focusing on brand loyalty, user experience, customer retention. And the way to do that is so that they feel like when they buy, they don't have to buy a new car to get a better car. Their car is always getting better. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to buy another brand like that because it's great. So the software-defined vehicle has the potential to add a lot of value. And we can talk about why I think that's a benefit to OEMs, not necessarily a tax. I think there's a fear that it's a tax. I think it's a huge benefit.
Yeah, I agree what you just said, John, and David as well. I think when we look at the differentiation imperative for various brands, we look at it as three different levels. One is what are the capabilities and the features and the expectations and the experiences that are built and delivered inside the vehicle. This could be anything, whether it's the way the car accelerates, the infotainment features inside the vehicle, the climate control and other features that are inside the vehicle. And all of those things are actually being accentuated, accelerated, and multi-fold enhanced by the software-defined architecture that we're talking about here. But that's not all. There are capabilities that the software-defined architecture is bringing, which is around the vehicle. So whether it is, the connected features of navigation, up-to-date real-time traffic information, whether it is, the infotainment streaming capabilities, whether it is even your connected mobile apps that you're able to, use. All of those put together then creates a next level of capabilities, which are opportunities for differentiation. And then we go beyond what we call as beyond the vehicle, which is really everything that happens at an enterprise level. So if you're managing subscription services, for example, how do you manage the billing? How do you manage the customer service for that customer? How do you actually, bring fleet management capabilities for commercial customers? So again, that's another level of brand differentiation that is now possible because of the software-defined architecture that we are now able to progress. And each brand being able to select their own unique combination of these capabilities, whether you're looking for the segment of the customers that you're dealing with, whether it's a first-time buyer, whether it's a age segment that your brand is specifically targeted to, or a commercial customer that is a segment that's targeted to. Each brand has the opportunity to now specifically and very, very purposefully target the segment that they're looking at. And that, in my mind, when I look at it from a brand promise, a brand experience, and a brand enhancement opportunity, it now gives a lot more control, a lot more opportunities for the OEM brands to take where they want to take their brands to.
Yeah, I think I'll just build on what John, David, and Aditya have already said, right? I think the fundamental point is the car that you buy has always been the best version that you buy. It always degrades after that. You now have an exciting but a terrifying opportunity of buying a car that's the worst version of itself. And the path that will follow is it will only get better. And that better part is going to be delivered through software updates that are now improving experience. Right? Now this is both exciting and terrifying. Right? Now you see weave into this the fact that there are regulatory requirements that require you to go electric or alternate. That's regulatory. And there are consumer preferences that are saying, look, no longer does look, feel, touch matter as much as the experience that I get digitally. Right? And what does connectivity do and so on. And the last one is there's an opportunity to also use technology to shape consumer preferences. One is to react, which is Apple does this, phones do this, what does my car do? That's one way to catch up. The other is to say I'll shape demand, which is can I give you more autonomy? Can I give you more autonomous features? Can I make it easier to drive? You're shaping demand here because drivers and definitely passengers are not used to it. I can tell you it's a terrifying experience the first time. Right? Because always watching to figure out if the car is really driving itself or not. So I think this is the envelope that we're living with. right? And there you're making decisions about what is the most optimal hardware, what's the most optimal software construct. All this would have been fine if all the other pieces were fixed. Unfortunately, we have everything moving at the same time. And I think that's what is causing all the excitement and maybe the opportunity for companies like us, because we are ultimately a product engineering company. We are working with customers to deliver technology paths that they want to implement. And maybe that's the path to opportunity for us for sure.
Phenomenal. Thank you. And that's a very interesting put on how we can now deliver value when we have this SDV in front of us. But then I have a slightly polemic question. We saw other industries going through this software-defined transformation. So it happened in the phone industry. And we can't deny that there has been some sort of commoditization in the industry, right? And then that happened in the PC world as well. We saw the brand of, the chips inside of the laptop, for example, Intel inside becoming something important as well. So I'm just wondering, do you expect the same level of commoditization to happen in the automotive industry as well? Or will OEMs be able to differentiate better?
Yeah, maybe I can start. I mean, I think commoditization always happens, right? It's a natural part of the process as you evolve products. Some parts of it just become commodities and others. And if you think about it from the from the electronics side of or even the chassis or powertrain side of the vehicle, that the sensors that we use today, they're currently built with a certain amount of intelligence in them. Okay, the functions or some algorithm might exist, at the edge there, but we all know that as we're moving towards this sort of centralized architecture and the software-defined vehicle being able to to host maybe more aggressive ways of using the data centrally, then that information moves from the edge to, literally the remote sensor edge to the central part of the brain. And the tier ones, I think, are dealing with this by not focusing on necessarily the legacy sensors, but focusing on the high-powered computing, which is going to be part of that brain area, and providing the functions that exist in that domain function architecture. Okay, so delivering the functions, but more importantly, delivering those functions that can be integrated into the rest of the system. I think the OEMs are looking for system-level support, and not just buying parts and components, but also the entire system makeup. And for us, that means we had to migrate from a traditional sort of hardware transmission company to a company that manufactures both hardware and develops software functions, but also then knows how to integrate them, because you can't just logically move 100 ECUs into 5 HPCs without lots of software integration issues. And I think more of the focus from the supply base will be on solving that software integration and maybe trying to standardize some of those interfaces.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also would say that I don't think it's a binary thing where you go from 100 ECUs to 5, because I think, bear in mind, there's still going to be, we think the zonal architecture is going to take off, where you're going to have portions of the car that handle the myriad sensors that are still going to be there, and you're not going to connect all those directly to the central computer. So I think there's going to be kind of a, if you will, hierarchical thing. And so your question about Intel Inside and kind of uniform consolidation, I think it's going to be kind of a spectrum where, yes, there's consolidation in the central compute, and even that is a journey where today you're seeing, as you said earlier, domain controllers. Maybe there's an ADAS domain, an IVI domain, perhaps communication domain, maybe a couple others depending on the OEM. Maybe eventually we'll come to a unified central computer, which is still a little bit in the future. But on the edge, you're still seeing these sensors and the other things. And ultimately, it's about data, because all of this data is around the vehicle. And what you don't want to do is just throw it right into the central compute and say, what do you want to do with this? You need filtering, you need pre-processing, you need real-time response in some cases to actuators and things like that. So I think it's about getting value in all of these places. And so while the original question, Maite, was about Intel Inside and commoditization, I think like the IVI space, very consolidated with CarPlay and Android Auto and those sorts of things, and that is certainly very user visible and some consolidation. But underneath that, there's lots of really mission critical stuff that it's still very much diverse, and I think will continue to evolve for many years, where there's still a lot of opportunity to create value, especially using data, which is something we care a lot about.
Absolutely. I think I agree with what David said and John said as well. I think we are at the point of time in the industry where standardization and some amount of consolidation is actually needed for the simplification of the architecture and simplification of the foundation, the core of the vehicle. So the standardization journey that's happening, and maybe even some of the things, whether it's the underlying OS or whether it's the underlying compute stack, players like NVIDIA or Qualcomm, others, they are making a play for the ECU consolidation, ECU standardization, but that's moving towards, in my mind, a point where it's the right thing to do, it's the optimum thing to do to actually make it easier for the vehicle capabilities, the evolution of the vehicle that Nitin talked about, to make it easier for new features to be released faster, to make it easier for new capabilities to actually be built on top of an already released vehicle stack. So in my mind, we are far away from the world where it's leading to commoditization. It's leading to the underlying simplification, which can actually accentuate the differentiation across brands, and it makes it easier for consumers to consume. It makes it easier for the manufacturers to manufacture. It makes it easier for the safety and the security of the stack that is going to live on the roads for the next 15, 20 years throughout the life cycle.
Right. With everything being said, I think it fundamentally comes back to the point of Intel Inside was as much a genius of Intel marketing as much as it was a failure of all the other brands to be more than just Intel Inside, right? Because Intel Inside is only successful when you're incapable of proving that you're more than that, right? So to that extent, I think we can safely rest with the fact that a vehicle is a lot more complex than a laptop or a PC, where the primary purpose is served by an Intel Inside. And if the automotive industry ever gets to a point of having to declare as in their product brochure which processor you're using, I think you can assume that the brand is on its way to its death, right? I think the key will be the ability to find ways of continuing to evolve and continuing to deliver that differentiation and making sure that you're delivering it at a speed which keeps you ahead of whoever else you're competing with, right? As long as you're satisfying this, standardization is absolutely necessary. You will see that happening, right? You will see that there will be some certain winners and losers in terms of which processes make sense, which don't, because that's driven by economies of scale, that's driven by preferences and so on and so forth. In general, I don't think we should worry about Intel Inside. That's more likely to happen on the software side than on the hardware side, because hardware ultimately you have 2-3 suppliers that will deliver the kind of GPU power and the efficiency that you need. Your real work will be on the software.
I think there is one interesting point, though. You raised the Intel Inside piece, though, and I think that we think about branding, right? And maybe the traditional brands, the OEM owns it all, and then we saw the rise of Microsoft and Google in the head unit and competing there because that's the obvious place where the consumer might interact. But I think now we're seeing the rise of Qualcomm for sure, and the likes of AMD and NVIDIA at a level below where the consumer normally sits. And so I can see that there would be some level of that Intel Inside sort of branding maybe coming along in the industry, whether it's from the suppliers themselves or in partnerships with the OEMs.
Absolutely.
So, I can certainly see that sort of playing out in the future. I don't know what you guys think.
Absolutely.
No, I agree, because my only point would be that if the OEM and the brand had to rely on that as a point of selling, then unfortunately you're going to be in a very hard place. So that's the only point I would make, that you would live with this fact that there would be a Qualcomm Inside or a Intel Inside, but if that was going to be your USP, you're in for trouble.
I think that goes to your point that the automotive product is more complex. Multi-dimensional.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at it from the way we look at it is what's happening inside, what's happening around, and what's beyond. I think those capabilities are accelerated and accentuated by the power of the software stack and the compute stack that's inside the vehicle, but that's about it. There are the actual capabilities that those enable is really the point of differentiation. And at some point in time, just like all mobile phones have some form of an ARM chip inside them, I think that will become, again, to your earlier point about commoditization, I think it will be commoditized at that level. But the differentiation will still lie outside. At least that's how we see it.
I mean, maybe another way to think about that is as OEMs are looking to do more software development and getting more involved in software development than they have classically. Classically, the software is developed in tier ones, generally speaking, and now the OEMs are taking more charge. Well, then the false choice is that OEM has to do everything. So on the spectrum of doing everything and outsourcing everything to tier ones, there's some happy medium. And one of the things I think you're seeing, to your point about ARM and so on, is you're seeing consolidation around a few architectures, so OEMs can get some economies of scale, and they can develop software that's portable and reusable, that they can add value. Because it's not about what is it this user interface or that user interface, but is the car capable? Is it upgradable? When I take it, the previous conversation was talking about service, and do you get a better service experience? Well, today the service experience when you take your car in is awful. So in that sense, they were right. It's because today we don't have great ability to understand how the vehicle's been operating, what's going wrong. Okay, you have a fault code. Okay, at Tuesday at 7 p.m. there's a fault code, but you don't have the context to understand why that happened. And so they were talking about one approach to that. And we're seeing software-defined vehicles already being used today, some more technology being used today, to give better context information so that the driver has a better experience because you understand how the vehicle is being used more.
Absolutely.
We talk to product planners who say that the moment the vehicle goes off the lot, I lose great visibility in how they're using the features. I'm putting in features into the vehicle that are really expensive for us to design in, and I don't know if anybody ever uses it. So can we use data in a way to give feedback, so for cost savings and enhancements, so that the vehicle that comes out is the features that customers actually care about, as opposed to the tick box item that they actually don't use. So I think there's a whole range of ways that, it's almost like a loop, right? The software-defined vehicle can, in a way, benefit the hardware design, because now you can be smarter about what hardware to put in. And then, as you said earlier, Nitin, the chance to delight the consumer with value-added experiences throughout the life cycle. So we see the, connected to the cloud, leveraging the skills of the cloud to do analytics and data. Data-driven, we're using data to all these things we talked about, flexible, upgradable, and then using consolidation to reduce cost and improve economies of scale. Those are, we think, the 4 critical aspects of software-defined.
Phenomenal. And John, you touched a very interesting point about OEMs developing software and the approach that they are taking. So at the start of this digital transformation, we saw a few OEMs deciding to embark in this journey independently. But now they realize that developing all the underlying tech necessary for the SDVs is an enormous effort. And they are now looking to work with partners. So I was just wanting to get your opinion. So do OEMs need to build everything themselves to maintain control over the vehicle brand and experience and differentiate their products? Or you don't think that's necessary? And if not, where should be the boundaries between the OEM ownership, the OEM brand, and the technology stack?
So in my mind, I think it's both. So OEMs do need to take control of their brand, the brand experience that they want to deliver, the trade-off that they need to make in terms of the features and the capabilities that they want to deliver today, and the roadmap of those capabilities, as Nitin mentions, keeps getting enhanced from here on. What's that roadmap looking like? And they do need to take control of the architecture that they need to put together, not just within the product stack, but also across the partner ecosystem, to really enable and bring this whole holistic experience to life. So having said that, when they take control of that, that doesn't mean that they need to be taking control and doing every aspect of the software engineering, every aspect of the hardware engineering on their own. It's just not possible. The capabilities needed to be brought to the table to actually make it real. It can be done, but it's extremely hard and not in the time frame that will make anybody successful. So partnering is a reality. I think all OEMs realize it. At this point in time, the way from, we work with 9 of the top 10 OEMs, we work with most of the major tier 1 suppliers. The way we look at it is that the journey that these companies are taking right now is really to get those core capabilities developed so that they can define their destiny, but everybody is looking to work with partners at various levels to scale and deliver the products faster to the market. The partners are going to be critical and actually are going to become even more critical in the journey, particularly as the vehicles, the next generation of the vehicles get released and the proliferation of the model, make, trim, combinations of all the optional features available today and tomorrow. When we project it forward for the next 15, 20 years, the ability to actually deliver that, maintain that, support that in the marketplace with safety, with security, as well as with compliance. I think everybody realizes that they need a partnership ecosystem to work together.
And I think from the way it was historically done, where OEMs had a relatively lighter involvement in software, maybe up to including very little, depending on where you fall, but let's say less, to the spectrum of doing everything. The reality is there's a lot of layers you have to deliver the software-defined vehicle. And very few of those are ones that are directly visible to the user, directly responsive to your brand, user experience. So the analogy I use, and if you like this, okay, is that you've got a USB port in your laptop. Well, you didn't buy the laptop because the USB port works. You just expect the USB port to work. Well, someone had to do that, and there's a complicated engineering to make that work. And it was just, you had to assume that was the case. And then Apple or whoever your laptop makers does a lot of other amazing stuff to make it really great in their brand and so on. Well, it's a little bit like that. I mean, there's a lot of capabilities you need to put in to make the vehicle upgradable, data scalable, configurable, enhanced experiences over the lifetime that is just table stakes for then the OEM to do their unique value add, whether that's their UI, UX, whether it's their connected experience, and so on, their autonomous driving capabilities, driver assistance. So why reinvent the wheel? Why don't you, and these are solved technologies in other industries, in data center and networking, these are solved technologies, important things you do. Yeah, of course, you have to adapt them to the vehicle's requirements, but that's doable. There are companies that can do that, and then you can spend your engineering on top. Now, on the other hand, and I think there's a hesitance from OEMs to revisit the past where they lost control of the software. So you have to do that in a way that's open, whether it's open source or standards, collaborative partners that can make sure you're not disempowered. But you can still do that in a way that you don't have to do everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you're making there. Of course, the automotive, the OEMs can't do everything, right? They need partners in place. It's really a case of where they see their brand and which attributes they want to control. And so, we, for example, when I look at attributes for safety engineering, ADAS engineering, and I see lots of different ways to sort of address the same function from a German OEM than I would at a Japanese OEM. And so the German OEM, wants to differentiate itself that way, wants to offer its customers that particular experience, and it's doing so by not only driving different performance KPIs, right, but also really giving it much richer data set, making that available. And not everything, of course, gets published, to the network so that it's all usable, but a lot of that data, to John's point, is available, whether it's transient or not, is available, and in the future could be made use of. But the point is, I think that suppliers will have to partner with the OEMs in order to deliver that experience end to end. And part of that is reducing the amount of physical testing that's, physical driving on the road, right? I think there's a lot more, we see a lot more requirements coming in terms of increasing the virtualization, not only of the engineering process, but also as we validate the whole system, right? And so I think they're looking for system-level confidence going forward. They still will define the attributes, I think, the OEMs, right? Will still define the attribute of that system performance, but I think they're looking for partners who, will have a lot of expertise in that system in order to help them deliver something that's very complicated. Like you said, that it has to be embedded into their system.
Right. Yeah, and in fact, I'll step back to the foundations, right? If you look at why ownership, ownership has to deliver a purpose. That purpose either has to be that I drive enough differentiation to get better premiums and margins, or I get better differentiation so that I can increase the volume of sales, even if my margins remain the same. And the big bugbear of ownership is that it comes at a cost. Unfortunately, maintaining the house, just not about buying a house one time. Imagine that you had to pay the cost of the house every year, simply because that's what you have to invest in to keep that software and that differentiation going, right? I think that is the simplest way to look at the world. Does it help for me to continue to spend this kind of money in the hope that I'll drive the economies of scale, I'll be able to amortize all this over my volumes and deliver the margins that I want? Or are there parts which truly allow me to differentiate, and there are other parts where I'm going to let the entire ecosystem amortize over many others? It's as foundational as that, right? And I think it's for brands to decide, ultimately. How much differentiation? How different is my positioning? So am I a Mercedes-Benz? In which case, if you did it just for the S-Class and kept percolating it down, that's one way to go, which is what they did for a long time. The other way is to build a single base of software saying, look, it's amortized over all my models, S to A. It's just that I turn on or off features based on which segment I'm playing into. That's economies of scale. Right? So I think it'll be brand decisions that are made on the fundamental basis of economies of scale, how many cars, what margin, how global are you? And beyond that, it's about whether you can bear the cross of carrying all that cost every year. Differentiation comes at a very, very heavy cost.
It does.
Rather, ownership comes at a heavy cost, but it does not guarantee differentiation. Let me make that point.
Yep.
Fantastic. So this is very interesting. I think we can all agree that the OEMs should focus then on the layers of the software that deliver value to the final customer. They are visible. However, how can they differentiate between these layers that deliver direct value and the ones that they should, the ones that do not, and that they should work with partners?
I can go first if you'd like. I think there's no elegant answer, right? Simply because you're trying to crystal gaze into what will be required in order to continue to enhance value or enhance experience or enhance features or whatever else. And unfortunately, we're not at a place where you can tell that clearly. It would have been very easy if it was very easy to say, look, these are the layers. These layers are so mature that nothing's going to change here. My architecture is so mature that hardware is not going to change, or evolutions of hardware will not matter beyond, right? I think we're living in a phase where everything is moving, and that's what makes that problem very, very complex. I think the automotive industry would do well to remember that there are other industries that have gone through cycles like this, including telecom and so on. There is great power in open source. There is power in standardization. And there is power in working with select vendors who bring very mature, hardened components that deliver economies of scale for those vendors and give you those access at reasonable prices, right? So I think somewhere you're driving that balance. I think it's a very difficult one to take a call right now, in my view.
I think just building upon that, right? I think we take a view that it's not about the layers of software. It's really what you want to take control of, like brand experience is one layer, and the capabilities that you want to build for long term, which will be a natural home for those capabilities in your organization. So what do I mean by that? For example, what's needed to bring the whole ecosystem perspective in the software stack to life is not just automotive capabilities. Now, when you're looking at communication capabilities. We're looking at data and analytics capabilities. We're looking at cloud engineering, cloud native engineering capabilities. We're looking at different domains. We're looking at payment services. We're looking at, say, tolling industry. So you need to bring in perspectives and experience and expertise from all these technology dimensions. You need to bring expertise from different business and industry dimensions for this experience to really come to life in a seamless way for your brand, for your customers. Now, the ownership answer is really then, where would I be able to attract talent at the end of the day for a long-term basis? I might be able to hire somebody from payments industry today, but would that person, would that team find this to be the natural home of their careers? I think it's an intersection of the domain, the technology, and the individual competencies that people are, at the end of the day, it's all about talent. So how do you actually triangulate these three things? And will be the answer as to what's in-house, what's long-term in-house versus where do you need to necessarily partner with other organizations for you to be successful? I think at the end of the day, the answer is really about, what combination of these capabilities are needed for your brand to succeed, and it's an individual brand's choice that you're making.
Yeah, I don't think there's one answer. As I said earlier, I think there are some infrastructural areas, things like networking and evolving networks, things like extensibility, upgradability, virtualization, application management, service-oriented architecture, a lot of these things which are well-solved problems in other industries, and reinventing the wheel just because you want to say you did it yourselves is just a waste of time. Now, as you get into higher levels, then I think the conversation is more complicated, as you mentioned, where I think OEMs need to be thinking about what are the valuable problems I can solve? Can I do a better job of fleet management and exposing value added that way? Can I do a better job of service and giving a user a better experience? Can I do a better job? Maybe they're really centered around the user experience and the head unit or the IVI. So where do they want to be? Kind of as you said, what's the thing they care about? Yeah. So I think everyone's going to make a slightly different decision, but certainly starting from a lot of the infrastructure things, it's silly to reinvent the wheel there. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that you're designing it in such a way that's future-looking, because as Nitin said, you want the car to fundamentally be able to evolve. And I used to joke with my engineers that, like, as soon as you rename the software file something final, you automatically find a bug. So, and I think it's sort of like that. It's like it's not done. So you want to make sure that you're anticipating from the beginning the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do with it, and build for the future, not build for today, to enable you to do these better capabilities that you don't even know about yet.
Yeah, and I think someone said it earlier as well about, we've had this discussion in the industry for the last decade about how you monetize data, and really the fact that there is this software-defined vehicle is generating huge amounts of data. It will generate huge amounts of data compared to current types of vehicles. So what to do with it? But I think the OEMs are looking to answer your question. They're looking to reinforce how the customer uses their vehicle, and so using that data to better improve the features and functions that they want to offer. And yet there's a whole sort of environment of people, suppliers and companies and people that have got great ideas about how to make use of that data capital sitting outside the vehicle itself, wanting to connect with it. And I think the problem that we've got is we have limited connectivity today with the vehicle, right? As a supplier, we provide a gateway that allows safe and secure connection to all different types of format, and it's processing something like 1,500 trillion operations per second. So very high capability, and yet still it's the only gateway typically out of the vehicle, right? And I think we will see potentially a way to sort of break that paradigm at some point with whether you're using Bluetooth low energy or some sort of low cost connectivity that allows suppliers and other sort of members of that sort of whole environment to interact with the vehicle, okay? And that way maybe gets back to your question, which is where's that layer interaction, okay? How much does the OEM want to control and how much will they allow others to interact with that vehicle? Because there will be a need to improve the vehicle over time. That is definitely what the industry is driving towards.
Phenomenal.
Very good.
Thank you very much for the contribution. I would like now to open to the audience in case you have any questions.
There you are.
Thank you. I'm Brad Gieske. I'm from Stellantis. I'm just kind of curious, as far as if you guys were strategizing the future for an OEM, would you recommend separating out the evolution of the software and the hardware? Or would you recommend having them be totally synergistic, meaning that every evolution you do both? So the offsetting approach, kind of an interesting one, where the technology, the hardware can evolve, right, without the software, and then the software can evolve without the hardware. So I'm just kind of curious what your takes are on that. If there's something, just from the outside looking in, it'd be really exciting to hear that.
I think the whole premise of software-defined vehicles is that the software is independent from the hardware. And so I think I conjecture that all of us would agree that you really need to have an independence. Now, how exactly you achieve that, we open source, many people believe in open source, we believe in open source. That solves some of the problems, not all the problems. But the whole point is if you're tightly coupling the hardware and the software, you effectively don't have a software-defined vehicle. You have an old-style vehicle that happens to have some software in it.
Yeah, I'll have a slightly different take, right? On one hand, absolutely true. Software has to be independent because you want to be able to deliver that enhancement, that incremental evolution that you've created into vehicles that have already been sold. But that's what keeps it fresh, that's what keeps it alive. But you're also going to be limited by the capabilities of the hardware that the vehicle has, right? So, and this is not just hardware in terms of compute, right? For example, imagine that I put two more sensors into the next generation of the car, right? Now you can do more things with that sensor, but the point is just upgrading the software, unfortunately, because that hardware is missing in that vehicle, is never going to deliver that functionality. So to that extent, I think you will continue to have an evolution of hardware. Why? Because please remember, phones, computers, and so on, you always need more memory. You always need more MIPS for anything that you do as an evolution. I've never seen any software written till now which got more efficient over time, right? So to that extent, you can imagine that you will consume, earlier you used to have MBs of memory in a car. Now you have gigabytes. I'm sure we'll move to petabytes of memory that sits inside the car, right? So think of that also as a hardware cost, right? So I suspect that you will have generations of hardware evolution, primarily to make provisions for the software evolution that you're making, partly also because you're providing for functionality that did not exist, which can never be delivered into a car that's already sold.
But you don't have to throw away your software.
Not at all.
So I think we're saying the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're saying
you want to be able to have a
independent paths.
smooth
Correct.
evolution path, backwards compatibility,
Correct.
and so on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think the other part of it is that the revenue model of the automotive industry is still going to be predominantly heavily skewed towards the first sale, right? No matter what we're talking about in terms of the subscription services, yes, they will become important, but a large part of the revenue model would still be on the first sale. And that would necessitate the evolution of the hardware stack, the sensor stack, the software stack, and it will necessarily move towards a model where, yes, you'll support, like just the way Apple does today, a few generations of the previous iPhones, but maybe not the entire 15-year-old iPhone to be supported on the next software stack.
Yeah. I think it's everyone said the same thing, right? The hardware and software are not tightly integrated, but they are linked to some level. You can't randomly take this software and that code rather and this hardware because they get validated obviously together, right? And OEMs, safety is everything. You can't just sort of pick and choose, and so there's going to be some level of agreement that has to happen. But I agree. If you've coded your software correctly, then in theory it can run robustly on different styles of hardware, and that must be the intent going forward.
Perfect. Well, do we have one more question? We have time for one more question. No? Everyone wants to go for the drinks, isn't it? Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been a great discussion, a great day of ending the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Maite.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.